Hello, my friends. This is Rick, and this is your seat at the table. We are looking at the West End Games version of Star Wars, the role-playing game, second edition. I'm not going to go into great detail about them. There was a lot of minor changes between first edition and second edition, mostly to clarify things, to add some stuff that they felt or the players requested or that they felt were needed. We're just going to do a little quick overview on it. Some changes on my perspective, and in the past I have a habit of adding a bunch of personal stuff in these videos, and I've tried hard this past year to deviate away from that stuff, but sometimes they play a part. And in a couple of previous videos I had to have several different glasses. I had my regular glasses and I had a pair of higher magnification reading glasses. Because I was recently diagnosed with diabetes, and my blood count numbers are running in the mid 200s. It's up and down between 220 and 300s. So we're still working on dialing meds and stuff. I'm not taking insulin shots yet. I did stop drinking Pepsi altogether. I switched to Pepsi Zero, and they put me on the meds. It took a couple of months. It was starting to mess with my eyesight, and I was having issues. So they had me go to see an optometrist because diabetes, you can lose your eyesight if you're not careful, and among other things. And so I wanted to make sure. They said my eyes are pretty good. Considering, of course, that he told me not to run out and get a new prescription, and it's fluctuated and it's stabilizing, so I'm seeing better than I was last month. But if you may or may not notice, I have a bit of a lisp. That's because one of the other problems with drinking Pepsi most of your life or other high sugary sweet drinks is it takes its toll on your teeth. And genetically, I've always had bad teeth. My dad hated that fact because I used to go to the dentist a couple times a year when I was younger. I've had root canals. Probably 3/4 of my teeth have had root canals in them over the years, and it showed up in the latest dental visit. And the dentist determined that none of my upper teeth were salvageable. I had some couple good ones, but for the most part, the rest of them were garbage, and they couldn't be repaired effectively. So the extreme option, of course, was the only option, and that was to have what was left removed, which means I have no upper teeth, which is causing a little bit of a strain, of course, on talking, because I'm trying to deal with the fact that I'm missing a piece of structure in my mouth. They will fit me for partial dental or an upper in a few, probably 2 months. So please bear with me on the fact that my voice does have a little change to the timbre. It is what it is. So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, the role-playing second edition. Now, to be truthful, I bought this edition, but I never really played it much. I spent most of my time with the original Wedge version, the first edition book, and this came out toward the end of West End Games' lifespan. This was produced, this is the third printing book, printed in May of 1994, according to this. And some years later, in, say mid 2000, I guess 2005 or so, I got access to the D20 version that was put out, and I really like that much better, to be honest. There's nothing wrong with the solar system; it's quite functionable. It's just that the D20 system is so like D&D, it just makes this easier to transition to. So anyway, that was a copy belonged to a friend of mine, and our pathways have since parted some years ago, and of course I gave him the books back, and I keep meaning to buy a D20 system book if I can find it. I know that the Age of Rebellion, Age of Empire, stuff like that, those are great looking stuff. I've looked at them at the game store, but they're just the price range. I don't have any people to play it right now, and the idea of spending that much money on just having them on my shelf for personal enjoyment, just can't do it right now. Maybe later when they're cheap and they're on the secondhand shelf, whatever. So we see a little bit of changes and stuff, nothing major. A little bit more fluff and filler, some modifications to the skill list. You know, I just did a video on initiative too. I wonder, you know, I don't want to tie up 5 minutes trying to find something. One of the things I miss about some books that other books don't do very good is I like that index. I like having that index page where everything is on the back and you can go find it down. This little hand is not as convenient, especially when you're trying to find something in the middle of a encounter somewhere, right? So anyway, we got some modifications, a few additions, nothing too earth-shaking. It also brought us up to speed with changes in the Star Wars canon at the time, which is now Legends, new book series, source movies and things, and the cartoons and stuff that came out. It allowed for fluffing and filling out and bringing it up to the current, at that time, current level of Star Wars, right? So, right here, there's that. Role-playing battles. There's an interesting other long-term actions. Players will be players. When players get involved in these types of situations, they probably come up with plans and suggestions that you never thought of. That's where the art of improvisation comes into play. If the players come up to a great battle plan, give them the opportunity to make it succeed. Provide several new events and encounters, describe things. Otherwise, be able to be flexible. And sometimes you need to alter your own, as a GM, alter the story so it takes into account the player's directions. And the railroad becomes a sandbox, as somebody quoted recently on my D&D Beyond channel. Adventure graph, drown, events, episodes, role events, characteristics, some nice artwork. I always like the artwork because, you know, like they say, picture's worth 1,000 words. Distinct behavior, role and adventure objectives, running adventures, planning stages, using cinematic techniques, maintaining directions. Players will always do something unexpected. Many times you'll find they want to do things you haven't even thought of, and this direction takes them directly away from the adventure story. Wing it, improvise. For the time being, go in that direction, and at some point, arc it back to where you originally were going. You know, the reason why the railroads have switches and curves and turntables is because sometimes you need to reroute the train. Sometimes the train wants to go off the tracks, and you have to bring in the wrecking crews to put them back on the tracks. So, whatever it takes. All right. Episodes: Bounty Hunter Returns, Shipboard Adventures, Basic Mechanics, Tributes to Skill, Die Codes, The Wild Die, Mishaps, Complications, Force Points, Getting Force Points Back, Dark Side Points, Favors, Character Points. Should the players know the difficulty number? Should players know the difficulty that they're rolling against? Only if you want them to know. And you have to decide why you would want them to know or not know. I mean, it's an individual choice, right? Opposed rows, combat injuries. Anybody know? Put that there for a minute. Because, like I said, I'm still dealing with this lack of front teeth. The bottom teeth are in good shape. They're salvageable, the dentist said. Top teeth was. I had to sit there and stare at that x-ray they took for an hour and a half. It was pretty depressing. Combat modifiers, armor, preparing and rushing, fire control, ammunition, grenades. What do you mean you ran out of bullets? Yes, even the blaster can run out of charges. Med packs, back of tanks, rate of fire, combine actions, figuring your averages, scales. Chapter 4, attributes and skills. When do you roll? And this is part of that argument that goes on today about story and story now and the lack of the fewer dice rolls, the better. But sometimes when you don't, when nobody can agree on how an outcome should come out, or when you really truly want a random result, a random factor, the active chaos involved. That's when the roll comes in, because the dice is the moderator at that point. You turn the control over to the dice, and how the dice roll affects the situation. When do you roll? Whenever they do something important or somewhat difficult, when someone wants to walk the corner store, they don't have to roll it. If someone, like, that's something someone can do any time, like turning on a light, don't bother with a roll. However, if there's a chance of failure, and especially that failure has consequences, the character has to roll to see how well he or she did. Or do they? You'd make that decision. Always, 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 at the end of the day, the game is about having fun, have fun, and go from there. Streetwise, survival, value, skill set. See, here's a game system. D&D 5th edition has limited your skill set. They have simplified by quantifying many types of skills fit under a certain category. So climb, swim, run, all those now are under athletic. So if you want to be better at them, you put points into athletics, as opposed to being more specific in character. I can be a much better, look, I can climb not so well. I can climb better than I can swim, straight up. I don't care how athletic I am or not. I am better at some things than I am at others. The question is how fine of a difference do you want in your game? So the same thing, Star Wars is a game system of skills. This helps define the character and the classes they choose. Obviously, you can always try to be a jack of all trades, but you usually fail when this matters the most. We specialize as characters. We do this in D&D and other fantasy settings too. That's the reason they now call the tank, the defender, the whatever, we have the wizard, we have the rogue, we have the fighter, we have the cleric, we have each one specializing in a certain type of things and skills and spells and abilities. So the same plays in most game systems. And there's been this downward curve in some places to minimize that, to shrink it down to make it more or less crunchy. And that's fine. The communication sensors, you got perception skills, strength skills, technical skills, Chapter 5 on movement. It's funny how often we take movement for granted. In this case, with things like passenger vehicle combat, ramming, long distance travel, running, got a section on vehicles. It's like I heard the debate about why walkers, why the ATs and ATSTs, etc., why not have tanks, hover vehicles, and things. Even they have all those, but why these? Because it's Star Wars. It sets it apart. It makes it something different. It's the same reason why battle techs have battle mechs. The mechs work for BattleTech. It doesn't matter that it would be, and it seems to be much more effective to have tanks that are just heavier with more firepower, etc., especially vehicles. But the fact is, this is what makes Star Wars is having some unique stuff to it. It's some of the archaic ways things work. Why is the galaxy, the Republic, 25,000 years old, and its technology is more or less hasn't changed much in most of that time? Because that's just how the galaxy works in their world. Innovations are not quite that innovative. All right, space travel, some more great art. Special equipment, shields, hyperspace, starships, hyperdrive, nav computer, sensors. For the most part, the majority of this stuff hasn't changed much from the first edition rules. Like I said, they've added some more fluff. They've added some more better descriptions. They've added additional things that came about that weren't in the original book because the movies and the books and stuff introduced them, and we get better information on the older ones that's adapted to the newer version of the game systems. For the most part, though, it's pretty generic. You could just as easily get by with some supplements. I bought it because at the time I bought everything that come out, even though I didn't need it. But I just did. So we got Galaxy Structure, Inner Rim, Core Worlds, you know, the HoloNet, Empire, you know, information generics for your world building. More section on aliens, additional ones that weren't there. Of course, the horse. And that's something on that one picture. I see this picture, and I have to think, doesn't this fellow not look more like Ming the Merciless? I'm sure it's not supposed to be the Emperor. Obviously, it's some other baddie or whatever. But he sure does remind me of Ming the Merciless. I hope that was not by intent. Or maybe it was, right? Do all Force users have to be Jedi? That's a debate and an argument for another day. Chapter on equipment. Some extra stuff that wasn't in the first one. And our appendixes and pre-gens and stuff like that. So there you have it. Second edition Star Wars. Get it? Don't get it. It's not going to change the game.